So here we are, the top 50 worst albums of 2025. It's been an insane year, and I always want to do the worst album list to get it out of the way because, you're leaning more into the negative side of reviewing, and often, I think around Christmas, everyone wants to kind of have a good time, not think negative. So if I make the last video for this, the top 50 best, then yeah, we've definitely got a better, a nice better end, to at least end on a happy note rather than just oh wow, this album this year had a lot of bad stuff. So yeah, we've got 50 albums I've ranked from pretty much the least worst to the worst because I'll be going down. I got dishonorable mentions as well, albums that weren't quite as bad as the top 50, but they're damn close. And I'm going to be listing them from the least bad to most bad, and then we'll get from the 50th worst album straight down to the number one stinker. So, for the dishonorable mentions, we have Sprints, All That Is Over, Home Is Where, Hunting Season, Insane Clown Posse, The Naught, Nova Twins, Parasites and Butterflies, Defecto, Echoes of Isolation, Prolapse, I Wonder When They Are Going to Destroy Your Face, The Neighborhood, Ultrasound, Guided by Voices, Thick, Rich and Delicious, Volbeat, Gods of Angels Trust, and Bush, I Beat Loneliness. That is the dishonorable mentions. We are going to go into the worst 50. Starting off at number 50, we have the brand new one, or I'm not going to say brand new one every time because he's been out for quite a bit, but we have We Are Scientists, Qualifying Miles. Now, I wasn't a big fan of the last We Are Scientists album, and this one is a slight improvement, but not by much. It generally didn't really have anything intriguing other than one or two songs that kind of played with some fun musical passages, but outside that, pretty dull record that had nothing really to offer. 49, we had Bad Flower, No Place Like Home. I've enjoyed some Bad Flower songs, but this whole album is just not a consistent fun listen. Just one I find is really hard to get into. There's not really any great qualities, and while I do enjoy a few tracks like Detroit, I don't really see myself really wanting to go to this ever again. It's just not a fun album in the slightest. Number 48, we have Sleep Theory, Afterglow. Sleep Theory has been on this massive hype spree, and I don't know if it's because they have a name similar to Sleep Token, or if it's just kind of oh my god, look at this new hard rock metalcore band, which they're not even metalcore, but I've seen people label them that for some reason. They're generally a post-hardcore band that plays with a lot more the kind of poppier and rock fusion, and yeah, their music generally feels very accessible, which isn't bad, and they do have a few decent songs here and there, but throughout the album, a lot of it's just a massive letdown, and just really hard to listen to. It's an album that I think has gotten way too much praise than it needs, and this isn't really anything original. Sleep Theory are just doing stuff that's been recycled for years, and I don't think they bring anything fresh to the table. It's just music that's gone big that I don't think necessarily had much to go with. Even their EPs they had, I think it was the Fallout EP, was generally a lot stronger than what we have here. 47, we have Behemoth, The Shit of God. With an album title like that, I was not expecting this to be a masterpiece from Behemoth, and I feel like this is probably one of the biggest letdowns, if anything. Just the instrumentation, the vocals, it just kind of feels like there's a bit of a lacking punch that Behemoth normally puts into their very aggressive sound. And when it comes to kind of black metal and just very heavy death metal, they aren't quite killing it with this one. Some of the singles they had were not interesting, and I think as a whole there wasn't really one Behemoth song I thought was close to even being some of their best. It just feels like more of a disappointing record, and I had to put it in the top 50 for that. Number 46, we have Scowl, Are We All Angels? I don't really like this one. I just found this one to be kind of a bit annoying, and generally a massive step down from what their previous album was. This just isn't a direction I think the band should have gone for, and I feel like what they had going with the first album was such an amazing sound. I don't know what happened here. It's a bit disappointing, to be honest. Number 45, Coheed and Cambria, The Father of Make Believe. This is the part 3 to the trilogy, and I didn't like this one. I feel like this one just has some really weak mixing, some very odd choices of writing here, and I think for a trilogy, the other two entries are stronger. This is just not really fun in my eyes. There's not really any instrumentation I thought was appealing to me. It just kind of felt very average and guess natural for them, but not in a way that I think brings out anything very creative. So gonna have to say this one was not very good in my eyes. Number 44 we have HERO, or Hero, Ghost of You. Outside of a few tracks, it just really gets unbearable with the effects they bring in. Sometimes the vocals can be quite obnoxious, and I think it's just a bit disappointing, to say the least. I really wanted to like this one as well, but I just cannot. 43, Chaos Sequence, Project Chimera. Yeah, this was also quite a big disappointment. Outside of a few songs I thought were also pretty solid. Execution as a whole just left probably one of the more unbearable but bland albums. I just didn't really feel anything much listening to this, and it's got a good premise, but yeah, execution was definitely lacking on it. Number 42 we have Skunk Anansie, The Painful Truth. Skunk Anansie came back with a new album after a good while, and it's probably the worst Skunk Anansie album I've listened to. I don't know what happened to kind of the more hard rock sound of their 90s movement, but here this is just not Skunk Anansie doing really anything that feels like Skunk Anansie. The closest you can say to the kind of the older sound is An Artist is an Artist, and that song is quite annoying, and one that I've grown off despite liking it originally. It's just a disappointing Skunk Anansie album. Like, you're coming back after a long hiatus of not making music, and you get this. A lot of slower stuff, a lot of stuff that doesn't really bring out anything that resembles classic Skunk Anansie. It just kind of feels like a more alt album just to kind of bring something to the masses, but it just doesn't really have the Skunk Anansie energy we know and love on it. Number 41 we have Haim's I Quit. I might be in the minority here, but I just think the pop rock group hasn't really got much to bring in that's interesting on this album. I know it's quite well liked, but I guess I'm in the minority that doesn't really like this one. It's one I found quite intolerable to listen to, and just doesn't really have the pop rock kind of sound I wanted to hear from this. It's just music that I find more dull than annoying, which I don't know which one's worse, but I guess at least didn't infuriate me, so yeah, but I still wasn't a fan of it. At number 40 we have Glare, Sunset Funeral. This shoegaze band has had a bit of controversy, but that's not why it's here. I just felt that there wasn't really anything Glare provides that feels refreshing or great. It's just shoegaze but in a weaker sound. There wasn't almost really anything that made sense here. It just was shoegaze, dulled down, watered down, and yeah, while we've had that with a bunch of other records this year, some of the shoegaze ones especially, this just is probably one of the worst examples of it. I just didn't really enjoy it. Number 39, Employed to Serve, Fallen Star. It's just not a fun metal album. Employed to Serve, I feel like they've had better releases in the past, and this did not gear up to be one of their stronger suits in my opinion. It's just another bland, forgettable metal record that I don't really have any interest in revisiting. Number 38, probably one of my most controversial takes this year. I don't really like the new Black Country New Roads album, Forever Howling. Now, it's actually probably more enjoyable than the previous. Yes, I know I'm in the minority. Just say I'm not a Black Country New Roads fan. It's quite that simple. But I wanted to give them generally a new try. They had a whole new dilemma. The lead singer left, and now they've had to have a new lead singer step in for it. And I think the vocals are definitely interesting, and I think they do carry the weight of what the previous did. If anything, I kind of find it more tolerable, as I wasn't a big fan of the vocals in Ants from Up Here. But outside of that, Forever Howling continues to stick to kind of more the art rock sound, and I do think there's some good examples of it, but I just never quite get into the jazz fusion. I can't quite get into the songwriting of this band, and no matter how much I try to enjoy it, I just don't see myself really going out my way to ever want to listen to it. I'm not the audience for it, and that's okay. I get that, but since I did review and I did listen to it, I did have to rank it somewhere, so apologies for putting it here, because I can see why people like elements of this band, but I still struggle to get it myself. It's too exquisite for my tastes. Number 37, Ghost Seeker, Divergence. Yeah, this one has just kind of a rough sound, and I get it, it's a smaller band, it's one that's kind of starting off, so the rough sound makes sense, but I just couldn't really get into Ghost Seeker's debut here. I'm not hating on the band. Whenever there's a new band that kind of ends up in the top 50 worst, it's just because they've had kind of a weaker start. It doesn't mean that they can't improve upon it. I just don't think this really has anything that exciting to go into, and it's just, if anything, that makes it a bit more less interesting to listen to. But yeah, we have Ghost Seeker at 37. 36, we have Sabaton Legends. Sabaton have just been doing the same sort of shtick with power metal and bringing in war, and I guess the whole anthology of war as well. But while I do enjoy elements of Sabaton's music, I just found this to not really have anything I was too excited for. I felt like there was just some moments where guitars just didn't really have any much instrumentation that felt as inspired as it just kind of does the same sort of element that the band's been bringing in. The mixing also sounds a bit odd in some areas, where the guitars don't sound quite as pleasant, to also the vocals just kind of having this weird mixture. Sometimes the drums just sound a bit off to me as well. I just think Sabaton at this point have been going for a while, they know what people want, and they just do it. And, you know, respect for them for that. I just couldn't get into this one. 35, we have Everyone Dies in Utah, The Cost of Clarity. Yeah, as I explained in my review for this, Everyone Dies in Utah is just weird. It kind of has the En Shikari sort of shouty vocals, puts in random death growls, tries to be spontaneous and quirky, which bands like Dance Gavin Dance do, albeit probably better half the time. This just kind of feels like a pacing issue, just slapping ideas together and giving you kind of a very weak result of it. There was not really one song I would even consider to have a great amount of quality to it. It just kind of felt like a below average hard rock album with trance elements to it. No, I didn't like this one. 34, we had The Dirty Neil, The Lash. Outside of a few songs being okay, I just find a lot of it just to feel very mundane. It kind of feels like it has a slower feel. It just feels like the album takes so long to go through, and it's not even that long of a record. Some songs have this kind of Green Day spark to it, and other songs, it can have some charm to it, but a lot of the time it's just feeling mundane and bland. I just don't really see any reason to want to revisit this one. 33, we have Finger 11, Last Night on Earth. Finger 11 came back 10 years after their last record, which wasn't a very good album, and yeah, this was not a good album either. But the problem with Finger 11 is that they just want to rely so much on this kind of radio hard rock sound that's not too heavy. It doesn't really bring the grunge nu metal feel the band has been building since Tip to Self-Titled, which Self-Titled was kind of the last element of it before we nosedived entirely into a more poppy radio friendly sound, which gave the band the main success they were looking for through the hit single Paralyzer. But then you just look and listen to modern Finger 11, they just don't really have it. Like, we had that Together Right single, which wasn't very good, and then we've just had, you know, Adrenaline released 2025 or 2024, I can't remember. Pretty sure it's 2024, and that also was a kind of bland. But now the album's here, there's just a lot of stuff that drags it down, and to actually add the same song twice, Blue Sky Mystery, to then just have a version without, kind of reminds me of Imagine Dragons having a lacking lackluster sort of track list for Loom, so they just put the normal version without the guest feature, or they add the guest feature to pad out the track list, because they clearly ran out of ideas for it, and it's very obvious with Finger 11 here. Outside of one song, I don't really care for anything else here. It's either or it's just not good, and yeah, Finger 11 have really been lacking now. which is disappointing because their earlier stuff is just amazing in my opinion. I really like The Greatest of Blue Skies the most. Number 32, Bless the Fall, Gallows. We had one good song on this, and yeah, that seems to be the trend. One good song and all the rest not good. But there's just such an octane core, a feel to this. Bless the Fall have had some great stuff in the past, and this album is like probably the most accessible, one of the more accessible albums. It's just not fun. It loses a lot of the enjoyment value I've had with earlier Bless the Fall, and this is just an album I think is really doesn't need to exist. It's just continuing the trend of this kind of more poppier metalcore, which I feel like is kind of becoming the norm at this point, which is very disappointing because a lot of metalcore either sounds the same because it's produced by the same people, or it's just going into this very cheesy, poppier way, and you get more people like Jordan Fish kind of contributing to that. We need to kind of not rely on that, but yeah, this is a thing that's happening. 31, we have Revy's Killing Time. This was a massive step down for a major comeback for them, and I don't think anyone even knew they had a comeback because not many people really knew who this band was anyway. Their first album was fine. This is just generally weak. The direction feels soulless. The whole approach just hasn't got anything to write home about. It's just there. It's just an album that you know is there, and that's it. That's all it is, for me at least. At number 30, we have the Lemonheads, Love Chan. Just boring. Lemonheads haven't really been the top of their game, and this is a band that's most known for covering Mrs. Robinson. So, I mean, what did you expect? Lemonheads they're just going. Good for them, I guess. I just didn't really care for this album. 29, we have Rise Against, Ricochet. This was horrendous. And there was probably one or two songs I didn't mind, but I wouldn't say I was big on either. The biggest downside to this is just how awful the writing is. The writing is kind of gone from the normal kind of pop, punk, hard rock sound the bands normally had, and I've enjoyed it. Well, I wouldn't necessarily say pop punk. They kind of have that energy. They're a punk band, okay? But this is probably the furthest they've gone from it. It's so boring, and the mixing into this new sound sounds god awful. It just kind of feels like every component that built a Rise Against album just collapsed after Nowhere Generation, which wasn't a good album to begin with, but it was leagues better than what we have now. This is the biggest fumble for Rise Against, and yeah, I'm surprised it's not high on the list, to be honest, but that just tells you how I didn't enjoy that a lot of the stuff this album either, so unfortunate for that. 28, Woe Is Me, Daybreak. Woe Is Me came back with a new album, and Octane Core. It is just, again, the most barren, bland stuff you'll hear on the hard rock radio, and it's worse than Bless the Fall, because at least Bless the Fall had something to write home for it. It had a song that I enjoyed, but this is just pure nonsense. They added a little bit of a country twang to some of it, and it just doesn't really make a difference. It just, if anything, kind of reminds me of bands like 0936 or Bill Murray, but in a weaker direction. I hated this. 27, we have A Day to Remember, a big old album, Volume 1. We have a Volume 2 that's confirmed, and no idea when it comes out. All I know is 2026 at some point. This was a massive letdown for being a promising album. It's better than the previous album because the one before was even worse somehow, but the writing on something like this was not great. I think there's a song called All My Friends, I think it's called, which I talked about in the review, was just one of the worst songs I've heard this year. It has got cool moments to it, and I do respect some decisions here, but it just feels like it's just blowing all of the stuff that people want to hear out of proportion, like the breakdowns and the heavier elements, but this is not a Day to Remember that I necessarily want to remember. The earliest stuff was just absolute timeless classics. Now I just don't really see myself wanting to go into it, especially when you have a song like Feedback, which is probably one of the most cheesiest and crappiest songs to basically reminded me of Motley Crue's Cancelled, in the same vein of it being terribly written, complaining about how people don't like it because it's not what they want to hear, but they've had a legacy, so who gives a shit? It's just not enjoyable. It's a very, very disappointing album. 26, we have Memphis May Fire, Shapeshifter. I'd probably say this is definitely up the running for the most disappointing album of the year. I really enjoyed Paralysed, which this one was a track of the week for me last year. Some of the singles were quite good. Chaotic, cheesy, metalcore for sure, but I liked it. It had some sort of appeal to me. Necessarily Evil as well did, but then once we got to Infection, the fourth single, I started noticing the flaws, and it was just by far the most commercialized, barren album from the band. And they've had The Old Me, which was them ditching metalcore for a more hard rock, post-hardcore sound, which I will be honest, I kind of prefer that to this. At least that one just had a bit more consistent writing, and it was shorter. This one, you had every single song released but one on the day the album came out, and at that point, is it even worth releasing as an album? It's just basically it's just basically good to mixed to bad singles. But going into it, I just think this as an album approach was terribly dealt with. It's one of the worst albums I've listened to, and a lot of the songs on there, while I would say there's a few that are good, the bad just outweigh the good in my opinion. It's a massive letdown of an album. 25, we have Pop Evil, What Remains. I wasn't big on Skeletons in 2023, and What Remains I think was even worse than that. There was just not a song that I would even want to go into. Skeletons at least kind of had a mixed bag appeal. It kind of was like bad with some good. I just don't really see any of that in this one. It just feels so bland. For Pop Evil, and when they experiment a bit more on Skeletons, I don't think they did much on this. It just didn't work out in my opinion. Gnosis, Genosis. Trap metal elements can work, but this just does it in a way that makes Falling in Reverse look like a deity to worship. This was not enjoyable. In my opinion. Luckily it wasn't the main appeal. There was definitely some cool metal elements, but I don't think this album really had much strengths to begin with. And Gnosis, while I do respect them, they haven't got the best reputation either. I mean, this is the band that kind of featured on that Nick Nocturnal song with Moist Critical, and that wasn't really good either. So, I mean, I can kind of tell you what to expect. Gnosis here were just pretty disappointing. 23, we have Tigress, Rubored, Bored. I will be honest, I was listening to this. This is probably one of the most boring albums I've heard. There's not really in it a terrible song, but with everything accumulated, a boring album with not anything to be excited about, it still has terrible qualities than an album that can be annoying. So unfortunately I had to put this one here. Despite it did have some interesting moments, I didn't want to listen to it again. 22, we have the Night Flight Orchestra, Give Us the Moon. I think I would probably rate this one a bit too low, because it's just an album I just don't think goes for the potential it has. It's a band that I feel like if they just really strode on to explore the sort of sound they want to go into just way more, and just had a lot more focus and effort to it, it could be, you know, not on these lists. But as of where it is, I just didn't find there's anything interesting with it. It just felt like a lackluster hard rock album with some cool elements, but not enough to really make any of the songs enjoyable in my opinion. 21, we have Doves, Constellations for the Lonely. This one was quite light, so again, am I controversial putting on here? Probably. I don't think this album was very interesting though. Doves have had some good stuff in the past. Some of their hits are pretty good, especially Black and White Town, but yeah, I don't really vibe with the new Doves album style, to be honest. It's just not for me. 20 by Garbage. This is Let All That We Imagine Be the Light. The band name pretty much tells you what I think of this album. Don't really need to go into anything else. I just think it's a garbage album. Just not one I would want to yeah, garbage. 19, we have the K's, Pretty on the Internet. Small group that had a #1 album this year with this record. Very basic, very pop rock. Very much not interested. It just doesn't do anything that would bring out any appeal than just, oh, the masses can celebrate a band getting a #1, when it's not anything that hasn't been done before. I mean, you have so many pop rock groups, like, come on, we've had Take That, we've had so much that have just appealed to radio, but no, the K's, this was so boring. Just a very, very nothing burger of a record. At number 18, we have Maroon 5, Love Is Like. It's Maroon 5. They've had, like, one decent album, and then they've just never recovered. This is another exception of that. I will say, though, it was better than I expected. As a yacht rock album goes, it wasn't too bad, I guess. At least for Maroon 5, this is definitely one of the better releases in a while. But it's quite high on my top 50 worst albums of the year list, so does that even matter? Like, you can polish a turd, it's still a turd sort of ordeal. It doesn't make a difference. 17, we have Sick Puppies, Wave the Ball. Sick Puppies came back with a new record, and this was just so shit. It's just very radio-friendly hard rock. It just has nothing exciting. It just exists because Sick Puppies wanted to, let everyone know a new album came out, and this is the worst album they've dropped. It's so unbearably annoying. Just shit album, in my opinion. 16, we have Thunder Mother, Dirty and Divine. The concept and quality just didn't hit for me whatsoever. Found this one to be actually quite annoying. From a lot of the means, instrumentals were boring, vocals I didn't get on with, and the writing certainly was definitely not anything great. So yeah, I think it deserves a good spot in the top 20. For me. Number 15, Our Last Night, Left Alone, the band that's normally known for doing covers all the time, when they're not. They're writing albums that you kind of at this point wish were covers, because when they actually write a song, a lot of their stuff is just very, very basic. This is very much your standard hard rock with poppy elements. It's basically like a Skillet structured song, but not without the Christianity to it. I don't get Our Last Night appeal, and I don't think I ever will, unfortunately. Number 14, we have Grayscale, The Heart, a very lackluster album that didn't have any redeemable qualities to it, and just had to remain quite high on my list here because it just wasn't enjoyable. I wouldn't really see any reason to go into this one again. Number 13, we have Manic Street Preachers, Critical Thinking. Manic Street Preachers have just generally gone to doing the most boring soft rock approach ever. It just kind of feels like a lot of what a lot of indie bands are doing, and it's just impressive to me how they've managed to have such an amazing start with records like The Holy Bible, Generational Terrorists, and then you get other stuff as well, like my favourite, Everything Must Go. There's a lot of good stuff. Even This Is My Truth, Tell Me Yours has got some nice qualities. Send Away the Tigers isn't too bad, but it just gets worse after a while, and their 2021 album wasn't really anything exciting, and this was somehow worse. This doesn't even feel like the same band. When you had tracks like Decline and Fall, I was expecting something, but this just went for probably the most boring sound I can think of. Probably the most boring album of 2025. It's a major letdown and just a massive step in the wrong direction for this band. Number 12, Larkin Poe, Bloom. I didn't enjoy Larkin Poe's new album. The folk blues rock generally does have some good elements normally, but Larkin Poe here just managed to make it really, really uninteresting, and I found this to just be one of the I would actually say, at least with some of the components, it's not as boring as Manic Street Preachers, but just by quality wise, I feel like Manic Street Preachers was a bit more consistent. This was not it. Number 11, we have Cleopatra, Fake Moon. how did they go from their debut record to Fake Moon? The problem I have with Fake Moon is the concept's not bad. It's just that every song sounds the same, in my opinion. This very tame, lo-fi rock direction, whatever you want to call it, just doesn't explore anything interesting, and it's just kind of a wall of sound from start to finish with nothing that catches your eye. I don't know how we got from their debut to this, but we did, and I did enjoy it. We are now approaching the top 10, and I can say in the top 10, these albums are leagues worse, in my opinion, than what we've had so far. We've gone from 2 out of 5s, and now we're on to the 1.5 out of 5s here, so my god, it's getting worse. Wet Leg and Moisturizer, just such a very... it's not even as annoying as their debut. Their debut was annoying and in your face, and that was the feel of it. But here it's just lacking it. And some of the songwriting of tracks, like Pokemon, CPR, and I guess some of the other tracks, I can't even remember much of the songs of this, don't really come off as anything interesting. I feel like Annoying Wet Leg had more appeal than kind of this more boring side of them. I just didn't really see any interesting ideas going into this Wet Leg album. But then again, it's Wet Leg, and I don't think they're really contributing to writing some of the best material ever. Number 9, we have Good Charlotte, Motel du Cap. This new album by them was just horrendous, and I can't believe that they would ditch the pop punk for and only use it in 1 or 2 songs in a tamer, watered down way than they used to. And they've just gone for this entire pop direction. It just reminds me of bands like Maroon 5 at times. I found a lot of the songs just be so dull, and the amount of support that news outlets have been giving it, like Kerrang giving it good scores and such. Really? This is like the worst thing Good Charlotte have dropped, and one of the worst albums of all, not of all time, but it's not too far off, I suppose. It's a really, really terrible record. I hated this one. Number 8, Icy Stars, The Wheel. I think this is the biggest example of the biggest letdown of 2025. Forget I even mentioned Memphis Mayfire. You have Icy Stars, massive comeback. I love New Demons, the 2013 record. I love Treehouse. Treehouse was tamer, and I know that they kind of cut the unclean vocals out, I think, since we had the new vocalist by that point. But they had so much charm with Treehouse. The softer songs like Calm Snow had a really lovely feel to it. You got a nice variety of songs like Mobbing Out, Walking on Gravestones, Running with Scissors, Break. Yeah, this was just a massive letdown, The Wheel. There was one song at best that was okay. Everything else has just been so obnoxious with the shouty vocals instead of the uncleans, despite the lead singer can do uncleans. Having to hear "All I Hear Is Noise" on Eliminator is one of the worst things I've heard. And the title track, The Wheel, is probably the worst song in Icy Star's history. 100%. I don't know what this new direction was on, but this is horrendous. And the only people I can see enjoying this are massive Icy Stars fans, but this just takes everything I like with the band and just waters it down entirely. Like, Treehouse may not be everyone's cup of tea, but Treehouse is leagues miles better than what this album offered. I was so disappointed because I absolutely love Icy Stars, but this new direction was abysmal in my opinion. One of the worst albums of 2025, and I'm baffled how they've even got to it. There's just so many moments where the songs feel so clunky, they don't flow into each other very well, and they just throw ideas in. Like, a few singles have been somewhat listenable, but yeah, as a record, this was not it whatsoever. Number 7, we have Set It Off, self-titled album, and this was abysmal as well. They've been releasing these singles for about a good few years, finally compiled it onto a record, and this is one of the worst albums I've listened to this year. I don't understand why these artists like this and Falling in Reverse have to do this kind of Tom MacDonald rapping style, especially on the first track, like Pathological. It makes the song not listenable. Like, I don't care if the chorus is fine, the rapping part sucks. And they do a lot of these kind of cheesy Ice Nine Kills sounds to it, and it just makes it very annoying. I enjoyed some of the songs, but I don't even want to kind of touch them now, because I just find a lot of this album just to be very, very bad. I don't get the appeal. Say It Off has had some good stuff in the past, and if the best thing on the album is a reborn version of one of your biggest hits, then the album is not really worth listening to. It's just a massive letdown. And if you've been following all these singles to find that this is the whole result, and you liked it, then I'm impressed. I just really hated this one. Number 6, we have Scary Kids Scaring Kids, Maps Written in Water. Oh my god, I hated this one a lot. I feel like Scary Kids Scaring Kids, when the lead singer was still alive, had some great ideas. I felt like they just managed to play into kind of this post-hardcore, hard emo sound with elements of metalcore working great. I feel like they've just had some generally great material from it, and it's very disappointing and very upsetting that they've kind of gone this direction. It feels like they're trying to milk the band's legacy, so the members can, have some money and income still, because this is just awful. Like, they didn't get a new lead singer, they just had a bunch of guest vocalists, but it just feels like they just really wanted to water down the legacy of this band just for extra bit of dough. I mean, just make a new band at this point. It just feels like they tried that with their own band and it didn't work. This was undoubtedly one of the worst albums of the year. Now we're in the top 5. This is where it gets even worse. But at number 5 we have Attack Attack 2. What the hell? They even did like a Ask Me Anything on a certain subreddit. They talk about complaining on r/metalcore, making jokes how bad it's gotten, right? And then you do an Ask Me Anything on it. Don't you see how stupid it looks? Now, it could be tongue-in-cheek humour, which obviously the band's known for, but a lot of people on a view on Attack Attack is that they're not enjoyable. They've had numerous controversial members. The side projects have amounted to a lot more interest, like Of Mice and Men, which was started by said controversial member. You had Bill Murray from Johnny Frank, who has generally gone on to have such a good career, and I feel like Bill Murray is probably the one making the most amount of profit at this point. And then you even had other stuff like Beartooth, which, again, that one's doing really well as well. It's surprising how these projects have had more success than Attack Attack, even Of Mice and Men. And it's good for that, because Attack Attack just kind of felt like, sure, it was somewhat original to have electronica, but do you know who else did that beforehand? Enter Shikari did it before Attack Attack, and Attack Attack are most known for the crabcore sort of thing, doing the crab stance while playing the guitar. Honestly, Attack Attack does have some fun energy in general. I feel like if it wasn't for the controversy and the fact that they can't write songs now, then maybe I'd find more interest in it, but this is terrible. Attack Attack 2, you made it a sequel, it is utter shit in my opinion. One of the worst albums of the year. Number 4 we have Stereophonics, Make 'Em Laugh, Make 'Em Cry, Make 'Em Wait. The album that stopped Ghost from getting their first number 1, because apparently more people in England and the whole of UK wants to listen to Stereophonics. How? The Ghost album isn't on this list because it's actually much better than this. Stereophonics are probably adapted to writing their worst album to date. It's the most dull, the most lackluster Kelly Jones have gone to, and it's weird because Ucha even had some good material from them. Do You Feel My Love I quite enjoyed, and even Hanging on the Hinges, or Hanging Off the Hinges, whatever it's called, was an enjoyable song, and it actually had some memorable tracks. This, I don't even think radio's even played any of these songs in a while, because nobody even cares much for it. It's kind of like Kaiser Chiefs. They just go very poppy, they kind of go so commercialized to the point where they want it to sound like them and want to act like this is the whole direction they mean to go for, but it's just because they've been running out of steam, and this is just one of the worst albums of 2025. I really did not like Stereophonics here. The bronze medal for the worst, well, actually, I do the kind of bronze, silver, gold, platinum, diamond, but yeah, third place, whatever you want to call it, Slaughter Prevail, Grizzly, one of the worst deathcore albums in existence. It's so bad. Slaughter Prevail have just been driving this absolute nail of a migraine, trying to be doing the sort of sound that Paleface Swiss have been going for, this kind of deathcore, new metalcore sound, trying to make it feel TikTok and hip, which it doesn't. This album is horrendous, and the only thing I think has got charm to it is Song 3, which was Baby Metal's own song for their album, but because they worked on it and Baby Metal are quite a big band, they shoved the song onto the album, and since it's Song 3, it's called Song 3 because it's the third song on the Baby Metal album, but it's the 7th song on the Slaughter Prevail one. You know, could have made that the third track. Oh, and this one also has an appearance from one of the world's biggest dickheads, Ronnie Radke, so that's good. Ronnie Radke has basically created Ronald 2 as his feature, you know, with the deathcore sound, we're going really heavy, so hip, add these trap beats to kind of break up the flow to show how spontaneous and creative we are, and then you put Ronnie Radke rapping. It's awful. I don't understand who this album's made for, but if I was a Slaughter Prevail fan, this would definitely be my turning off point, for sure, 100%. Grizzly is one of the worst albums of the year, without a doubt. Number 2, I had a lot of flack for this one, Dance Gavin Dance Pantheon. This is a complete nothing album for me. I gave it the lowest score I'd give an album, and do I stand by it? Unfortunately, yes, because I just hate this one a lot. Now, Dance Gavin Dance fans are free to disagree, but I just struggle to see the appeal of this band. There's a band that's been doing their sound way better and hasn't had, you know, several controversial members, but Dance Gavin Dance definitely has its fair share of controversy, not just tied to the members themselves, but also the music. Now, we've had a new lead singer since Tillian got the boot for, quote, creative differences, and unfortunately, Tillian was a much better vocalist than the guy we've got now. His vocals aren't a great addition to adding those cleans. Will's kind of... yeah, this album I did not enjoy. That Space Cow Ritual song was kind of the dropping off point for me here, the massive fall, and I don't see any reason to go into it. There's nothing that stood out to me. Not a single point of this felt like good prog post-hardcore. This was probably one of the most unbearable listens I had. I'm surprised it's gotten a mixed to good score on reviews, because I feel like this is worse than Jackpot Juicer, and that album was quite universally disliked to some capacity, I suppose. I don't know. I hated this one, and I think this was one of the worst albums of the year. Obviously, you're free to disagree, but as a Dance Gavin Dance album goes, I would never want to listen to this one again. And finally, we're on the worst album of the year, the album that just surpasses a zero album for me for being a worse zero somehow. Yeah, it is shocking. Arcade Fire Pink Elephant. This is one of the worst albums I've ever listened to in my entire life. It's boring, it's dull, it has nothing of quality that Arcade Fire used to have, and most of the album comes off as, oh, I did some bad things, feel for me. No, I will not, because this is shit, and if this is how you're going to try and win back people and try and kind of state yourself as this genius, then it's failed, because not only is it not interesting, instrumentally it just has some terrible sounds to it. It's so unimaginably uncreative, it is so uninspiring, and I'm surprised that we had the record to this. Even has so much better songs to it. Arcade Fire here have just failed it, and that is every album in my top 50 worst ranked. It's been a negative ride, there's been a lot of bad stuff, but don't you worry, we have got the best stuff coming soon, and that's going to be the the best stuff, obviously. That's going to be the better video for me. I always love looking back and seeing how some of my favourite albums rank compared to others, and album of the year for me is always a big deal. I love seeing what's my favourite album of the year. Kind of feels like it's the massive theme, it's kind of like the winner, it wins and it deserves it, and that's the thing I like. It's, and 100%, it's not biased. I guess it is, but it only applies and actually matters to me the most, so that's the thing I really enjoy about it. It's just nice to reflect on it. And I've also always enjoyed seeing what other people's worst albums and best albums of 2025 are, because there's probably one album that's not on here that a lot of people are thinking, why is that not in the top 50 worst? Because, you know, we have different opinions and stuff that people hate. I like. A lot of people like Dance Gavin Dance Pantheon apparently, and I didn't like it, so, you know, we all have our different opinions, and that's what makes us human. So, we got that video coming. Hope you enjoy. Thanks so much for watching, and this video is going to be a pain in the ass to edit. Merry Christmas as well.